Strange and terrifying things are happening on the battlefields of World War I. Things far more chilling than the terror of war. Fight and die because you're never going home.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Dungeon Masters Dojo podcast. This is a show for game masters and players alike. We hope to bring you tips and tricks to elevate your game and develop the art of dungeon mastery. I'm your host, Louis Aponte, and these are your dungeon masters, Scott Labby and Bill Robotile. Let's enter the dojo and see what they have in store for us today.
Hey, Scott. Hey, Bill.
What's up, Lou?
I'd like to introduce Matt and Brandon from Never Going Home.
Hey.
What's up,
Hey,
guys?
everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Scott and I at Gen Con 2019 were lucky enough to spot your table and be like, this looks really interesting. Plopped ourselves down and had a phenomenal time at that table. Loved the game.
Absolutely loved it. We've been talking for a couple of years now of trying to coerce you into joining us just to talk about the game.
No, twist our arms.
Yeah.
Oh no, I have to talk about the game.
Of course, it took us a year to find the program so we could remember who everybody was.
Yeah.
Well,
I was like, what was that cool game with the awesome artwork that we liked?
That narrowed it down to every game we played.
Yeah.
So I was asking for specifics.
What captured me initially when we were looking at games was, the name of the game and then the artwork. And the artwork reminded me of, I don't know if you guys remember the comic book series Weird War Tales. I think DC Comics did it.
Yep.
And it was this awesome, kind of anthology thing with it was weird stuff happening during, all these different wars throughout history. And this looked like it was peeled from the pages of that comic book. So I was like, yes, please.
Yeah, Charles Ferguson Avery is the artist for the whole project, and he's definitely inspired originally by comics. I mean, I think he tried to become a comic book artist before he got into just illustration of games and doing his own writing for role-playing games. But so that it looks like a comic is not
Wasn't just happenstance.
An accident, right? It's not happenstance. That's definitely it. Part of his inspirations.
I had met him actually at Gen Con a couple years before. I think it was either 2017 or 2018. And I was working a booth, and he came up and was showing some of his art, some of his serialized art, which definitely gave me like a Jeff Smith bone feel. And his art was great. We reached out, and he did some work for one of our projects for Never Going Home. I'm sorry, for Wild Skies, which was our first game line.
Oh, yeah.
And so he did some work there, and then we started following his work, and he did this Inktober project with just doing a little doodle a day with this kind of weird war kind of stuff. And he eventually compiled it into his own art book, World War Occult. And we loved it so much that, Matt and I talked, and we said, should we just see if we can ask him if he wants us to do a game around this? So we licensed the art and made Never Going Home. It was wildly successful on Kickstarter, and we had a second Kickstarter and for some campaign books, and we have more in the future.
It kind of did about ass backwards. Most people do the game and are fighting to find artists, and you found the artist first. I'm jealous.
I can see how the artwork is inspiring. It's very easy to look at that and go, okay, let's make something about that.
Especially the way he did it. Brandon and I, being role-playing game guys, we get this art book. Like Brandon mentioned, he was doing the illustration a day. You saw the soldiers, you saw the gas masks, you saw the rotting, still alive sort of people, you saw the monstrous creatures, and that was just what he was doing. But then after that month was over, he ran his own Kickstarter for World War Occult. It's his dad actually wrote some poetry to go with it. So it's this poetry book and art book, and it really gives you this feel of an artifact from the war, from a soldier's sort of diary of they're writing the poems about what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, and they're drawing sketches of their comrades as things go from bad to worse. It already was so narrative, so evocative of storytelling that all we had to do was apply a little bit of rules to it and just keep all of that feeling that came with the project already, as far as like making it a soldier's diary and stuff like that. So our first, our books, especially the core book, they have that sort of like collection of documents kind of feel where, they're laid out with paper textures behind every page, and we used handwriting scripts to do notes. We've got one of our writers focused on the fiction. So that's my sister and Brandon's wife, same person. We got her to write these fiction elements. So you've got these telegrams, these letters back home, and that are worked into between the rules and between the spell lists and between the monster stat blocks and stuff like that. So you can read the core book as like a sheaf of documents about the war, which is how we built on the original pitch, basically the original art book of Charles and his dad working on, we just took it to the next level, right? To give it the paper textures, to give it the rules, to add the fiction in, to make it a whole story. And obviously we've continued that through the other books with that fiction theme, that document sort of thing. We're even calling the campaign dossiers is the name of the current, we did our original core book, and then we had the campaign dossiers are the 6 adventures that are connected together. We did a second funding for that. So that's that idea of it being sort of a set of documents that all relates to the same thing is it was a natural evolution from the origins of the art.
When we did our initial Kickstarter, we worked with a local artisan who actually took some of the core books and made hardback, leather-bound soldiers' journal copies of them, and like etched in, like never going, like scratched in, never going home on the cover, and it just
it was like a
great
foil stamp letter, so it's a journal on it, but then it was like scratched with never going home on top of that, as if, again, this artifact sort of feel. That's what we were going for.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, that must have been beautiful.
They're pretty great. We I think I didn't end up with one. I think we gave them all away to our top tier backers. So
and forgot to keep one.
Well, I think it was a question of how fast can such a labor-intensive item be produced, not asking our artisan for more than was reasonable.
So limited quantities.
Brandon Vigliaroni of Strano Books did the work for that. It's out there on the internet. I'm sure he's got it on his, I should hope that he's got it on his CV that he did this with.
Tell us about the backdrop of Never Going Home.
The elevator pitch is its eldritch horror in the trenches of World War I. So during the Battle of the Somme, there was an incident that occurred that thinned the veil between our world and the world of the others, which are these kind of supernatural entities, these unknown supernatural entities. And so now people on the battlefields of Western Europe are hearing whispers offering various forms of power in exchange to do certain tasks, which, in a military structure can be very problematic because you don't know if your orders are coming from the chain of command or they're coming from some weird creature from the unknown. We definitely kind of lean into that element of, you can be kind of whoever you want. You can be a British soldier, a French soldier, a Hungarian soldier. You could kind of all in a group together because of the way circumstances have unfolded. And we kind of lean into it being mission based. We originally conceptualized the game to have just standalone missions. And every one of our books has some missions, and we wanted every book to have something for players and narrators, so they could say, so you never end up with one of those things where you pick up a book and you're like, oh, there's like 2 pages in here that are relevant to me. So we have all kinds of either new mechanics, new features, new whisper paths, which are our spells, and various missions. So as a mission-based game, we wanted you to be able to sit down at your table, if you're taking an off week between campaigns, or if you're doing a convention game or something, you could pick it up and play a couple missions and either have them be connected or not. Take place on different fronts. In order to kind of have that make sense, we introduced something called The Journey, which is kind of your Indiana Jones traveling music, right? It's like, that's what takes place between the missions, where, we ask all the players a question. They're given a particular card because our game uses standard 6-sided dice and standard playing cards. And then based on the suit of that card, you answer that question from a particular perspective. This is a selfish perspective. This is a perspective of a relationship or a power dynamic or something of that sort, based on that card. That system itself is called the +1 system because in the dice mechanics, you can add various things to your dice pool. And it kind of felt right there. That system is used in multiple games that Wet Ink Games has done. But for Never Going Home, it really felt right because we said, what would a soldier have in the trenches? They had dice. Soldiers played dice all the time. And soldiers had decks of cards, and they played cards all the time. In the +1 system, the dice mechanics never change. They're always the same no matter what game you're playing. And the cards can be flexible. In Never Going Home, those cards represent your humanity. So as soldiers and players go through the game, you hear the whispers or you need a certain bit of power to heal or prevent damage or to power your magic spells, or even just to lift the tractor off of your buddy. You discard cards and you narrate, again, based on the suit, what you give up. Okay, I'm lifting the tractor off my buddy, and now I don't remember my daughter's 2nd birthday. It's just gone. It may or may not be social commentary on the horrors of war and how you are a different person if or when you come back than when you left. That's my spiel.
That's a pretty cool mechanic.
Yeah, sounds cool.
It was.
You've played it. It works out great. It's almost surprising how well it works sometimes because people get there. Like Brandon just said, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a metaphor for the horrors of war. The whole game is in some respects the horrors of war, right? So like, we're not just talking about mud and trench foot disease and the fear of screaming shells and stuff like that. What if we make mustard gas into a monster? And what if we have like, sentient barbed wire that's coming for you? And, it makes it worse than it was in order to emphasize that it was bad, I guess, is sort of a weird way to go about it. But that horror aspect, the mental toll that those things take on you, you're put in a situation where you are invited to give up some of your humanity in order to survive by the whispers, by the power, by the allure of survival. Will you live long enough to lose your humanity, or will you just be killed outright by a bomb or, whatever? That's kind of the situation that we want to put the players in with the game. I've seen it at, my table and other play times when I played the game. People will have these, it doesn't matter what kind of character they've come up with or what sort of like kind of role they're playing, whether I've had officers, I've had people that just want to be the like, the fresh recruit or whatever, you put them in that situation, they're like, oh, I think I'm going to spend my card to make that happen. And you're like, all right. So, you either ask them, which can be challenging, you challenge them to add to the narrative, to tell the table what they've lost by doing that. Or sometimes if they've set up their own character, then you tell them as the narrator are like, okay, great. This is what that just cost you. And you can be very targeted in that delivery of the pain in that way because they've already given you what their character cares about because of how they've set it up and how they played it for the first 20 minutes or whatever they're setting. I've had lots of people groan, but I've never had anyone say it was bad. They're like, oh, that's the perfect thing. I hate you now, which I say that as a comedy, but it is sort of like, the game is trying to scratch something that it was a terrible time and you can only read about it pretty much at this point. Like the records from that particular war they're written records. There's some audio recordings, I suppose, but like first-hand accounts anymore, so it was in the air. Obviously, the centenary of the whole war has been in the air throughout the 2010s. And so we ran the funding for this game in 2018. So we were funding this game, like I think our funding overlapped with the armistice in 2018. It was like one of our posts as we were running our funding. It was like, hey, it's like 100 years today since this thing was over. It was just kind of culturally the moment to do it, I think, to revisit this particular point in human history.
Which is pretty stunning that there were not more designers or developers or companies that were either recognizing that or doing something with that. Yeah, we had played The Grizzled, which we had gotten, I think, the year before at Gen Con, which is a fantastic game if you've never played it. It's a card game made by Simon, whatever they say they are now. The fact that we as a company really find a niche that hasn't necessarily been filled. You get like World War I games, or we have a game about ancient Rome. We really wanted to make a Sky Pirates game over Western Europe at one point. And so like these are things we really wanted to do because they weren't necessarily out there in any appreciable way that we had noticed at that point as gamers. So as gamers, these are games that we wanted to play, and they just weren't there. World War I was one that was very surprising, especially around that time, was not being developed.
It was very simple to play. It's very easy to catch on.
Yeah.
I don't think we had any issue whatsoever.
It's a fairly simple rule set to pick up, especially once you start like rolling dice and dealing with combat and those sort of things. The way you built the system, the tone is consistent throughout the entirety of the game. Sometimes in a role-playing game, you can lose the tone.
Yeah.
You get sidetracked. That ever-present sacrifice,
yeah,
that's around the corner at any minute, keeps the tone a little bit heavy. And I think you need that, especially if you're dealing with a game that takes place during a war. And a lot of times wars are romanticized. You look at 300, any of the Lord of the Rings battles, they're epic, they're sweeping, but they're romantic. Never Going Home is none of those things. It's it's heavy. It maintains that kind of heavy tone where I'm going to give something up more than a limb.
You might also give up a limb.
That could could very well happen.
Compared to Piece of Your Soul.
Right. What you're hitting on, it was a deliberate choice. I remember us from when we were developing the game, one of our gaming buddies who was playtesting it with us was like, okay, well, what if I want to ignore my orders and go off and do something else? And I'm like, then that character does that. But you as the player roll up a new character who's still stuck in the trench because that's this game. Sure, you can tell whatever story you want about the other characters, went off and did whatever, but the people whose experiences this game invites you to explore are trapped in the situation and can't leave and have to go across the no man's land to get intel from the other trench because they were told to do so, and they have to come back now across the place that they now know is covered with mines and zombies, to get back to their trenches. You can't, it is the point of the game, is to put that situation where you are trapped in the war.
Right.
We found it necessary to remind people it is a cooperative gaming experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a squad-based thing. You're not, you're trying to remember if I have played it with just one person. I don't think I have. You could play just about any game with just like a single player, but I don't think I have. Yeah, it's always like, you're going with your squad mates to go.
But I think, Bill, I think that's a good point to bring up is, and we do this in almost all of our games, is we include a buy-in. It's one of the main pages, the first pages in our books, where we say, all right, this is the tone of the game. This is the feel of the game. This is what it is. If this is the game for you, then great. Or if you agree to this, then this is a game you'll probably like or probably enjoy. Because we don't necessarily want someone to pick up the game and be like, wait a second, I thought this was a game about clown college. I'm like, I don't know how you get that from the cover, but whatever. The entire feel of...
Side note, make a clown college game.
Yeah, mental note, clown.
Nobody else has done it that I'm aware of.
But that's the thing. We definitely call out the fact that this is this is squad based, this is mission based, but also it is collaborative storytelling. This is an experience that everyone, including the narrator, is doing. We're engaging all of this together. If someone's not having fun, if someone is not really able to dive into that wholeheartedly and with the support of other players in a safe way as well, where they feel comfortable sharing and experiencing the game together, then the group maybe needs to take a step back and reassess kind of how they're handling that scenario. You also brought up, Bill, the kind of ease of picking up the system. I'm glad you point that out. We've also used it most recently in a game called Heckin' Good Doggos, which is a family-friendly RPG, which uses the same dice mechanics, and it just uses cards in a different way. The system is simple enough and easy enough that you can play it with kids and even people who are new to role-playing games. That's kind of the intent. Everyone has six-sided dice, and everyone has a deck of cards. You can play any of our games.
Well, I know at our table, Scott and I have been gaming a long time. I've been TTRPG for 45 plus years. But we had two people that have been gaming for decades, and we had a couple people at the table that were relatively new to gaming, and it took very, very little coaching at all. They kind of were a little confused at first, and then the people at the table as well as the game master kind of gave a couple pointers here and there. But it was I think it was more of the table that helped direct them. Listen,
I love that.
I've played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tabletop games, so for me, I could pick up anything. Absolutely anything. So I'm slightly biased in that. But I say that because we did have new people at the table.
let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor.
You're a new DM who wants to jump behind the screen. Maybe you've been volunteered by your gaming group, but aren't quite ready. You've been watching people play games online or on podcasts, and you're thinking to yourself, where do they come up with all that descriptive narrative? There's no way I can do that. Well, don't worry. We've got a solution for you. What if I were to tell you that I can put a team of professional writers alongside you at your desk while you're prepping your game? Sounds pretty good, huh? With Describe, we can do just that. These narratives vividly describe monsters, places, spells, people, you name it. It's there, and there are more than 6,000 of these easy-to-search up, copy, and pastable, beautifully written narratives right at your fingertips. Confidently read these narratives aloud in your campaign and impress noob and veteran gamer alike. And the best thing about it is, the library of narratives is constantly growing, and it's affordable. Describe has graciously provided us with a discount for our listeners. Head on over to describe.com/DMD. That's DSCRYB.com/DMD. Use the code DMD at checkout to try Describe for 2 weeks for free. Links will be in the show notes.
And now, back to the show.
And even Scott and I were talking afterwards going, wow, they picked up, they jumped right in there. They had a great time because they had no problem maneuvering around the game mechanics. So kudos to you guys for that. Because I enjoyed it because I could just dive right into it. But you had brand new people that picked it up, and it didn't take them much more than like 10, 15 minutes, and they were off and running.
I love to hear that.
Yeah, there's only one kind of die, and it's dice pools. So, you're getting sets of 4, 5s, and 6s or 5s and 6s to win. There's not much there, as opposed to doesn't bring in the other polyhedrals. It doesn't bring in any additional math. Like we've done, our first game was a percentile. It was like percentile plus. So it was like you roll your percent and then you roll your 5 up to 5d6 to add percentiles to your percentile.
Yeah.
And we were like, let's make the next one easier. And
Might as well just bring back the Thaco.
I mean,
it's a little more digestible than that.
Yeah, well, with a
we called it
D6.
medium weight.
Yeah,
they're cheap, they're easy to find. Most people have them kicking around in their junk drawer because they're from a game that they lost all the pieces to. There's low cost to get in on the game. I was looking at Drive Through RPG. It's $20 for a print copy of the book, and it comes with a PDF. So,
I will also point out that you could also go to Indie Press Revolution and you can get the actual offset print run, which has a matte cover and glossy pages. It's a higher quality printed book, also for the same cost, and it also comes with a PDF. So FYI, you have choices.
Nice.
I don't know if you want to talk about like our marketing strategy, but I mean, that is, especially at conventions, we've found that like that price point, like people look at the game, they see the art, we've got a big poster of the cover, people stop and they ask, like you guys did, like, hey, what's this about? And you're like, we now have 7 books. You could buy dice, you can buy cards, you can buy a narrator screen, you can buy packs of character sheets, all this stuff. It's all there available if you want to get everything, but you only need this one book. That's all you need. And then it's $20. And then people are like, oh, $20. And like, and all the other books are also only $20. And so people very often are like, oh, well, it makes sense. And they end up buying everything because it's a sum that they can sum themselves when they're looking at the table,
Digestible.
Yeah.
And
I've also had people come up and say, what's it about? And I say, Eldritch Horror in the Trenches of World War I. They don't even like flip through it. They just throw a $20 bill at me and walk away. As someone who definitely is a big collector of RPGs and board games, like there. Even that, I'm not at that level. I'm just like, no, let me flip through it, see if I like it. But I mean, I've had people like, nope, that's exactly what I want. Okay. I don't know, man.
Yeah. It is definitely a strategy to make the game accessible. Like you say, it's only $20 to get started.
Yeah, let's hear some of what you got to say.
Because I think that's important for people too. As I get older and crankier, if I'm going to spend my money on something, I want to support an indie developer that's bringing a quality product to the table at an affordable price instead of a major corporation who's probably mistreating their employees and not giving them good benefits. And
I mean, to that point,
to be
Scott,
fair, we're not giving our writers benefits either, but we are very small.
I wish we could, and that's the thing. Like, that's the dream, right?
It is.
like you said, we wanted the game to be accessible. Scott, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Everyone's got dice in their junk drawer. I always say, like, go to your grandma's house, open her box of Yahtzee, and take one of her decks for a bridge, and you're good to go. And that's painting with a broad brush for grandmothers, but you know what I mean. Like, everyone has access to a deck of cards, and everyone has access to six-sided dice. $20 is an easy price point. I, as someone who, like, I bought my first RPG used from some kid who I used to play games with, and I used to like save up my allowance and ride my bike to the mall and go to the game shop and buy all the games I could. And so we wanted to make sure that, like, yeah, if you want to come and play our games, we want you to be able to afford them. We're not going to necessarily throw a $50 book at you at every single corner of our table. And Never Going Home, I think, not only from the content and the historical relevance and significance and the art that we really wanted to show off. We pride ourselves on being an art forward game company. We just wanted people to get it in their hands as quickly as possible. We also have made the conscious decision with our offset print run, we print domestically. We've only printed one product offshore, and that was our Zhongshu Blood in the Banquet Hall, just because the quality and all of the components and everything, there was no company domestically that could produce it in the manner that we wanted to do it. But printing our books, we were 100% able to do that, and we could print in volume in order to get that price point to make it accessible. That's our business model. I want, sixth grade Matt and Brandon to be able to afford to pick up a book and play it.
I was trying to remember what is the first book that I got. It was probably a Rifts book. It's the first role-playing book that I bought.
Mine was the old Palladium Robotech book.
Oh, I love
Yep,
those. I have the
those.
whole set.
I have the whole set as well.
Yeah, that's what this whole shelf is right here. So
I've never thought, like, what would middle school me have purchased this book? I don't know. Maybe I would have. I don't remember.
I would have. Even at a young age, I was dark.
I mean, I definitely had my morbid middle school phase for sure.
You guys bring up some really good points, and I think that's important that you did that. You've made a very conscious effort to make the game accessible, not just to those people that have an excess of disposable income, because not everybody does. I've always felt like there shouldn't be an extremely high price point to getting involved in the hobby, and it's a pretty broad hobby being a tabletop gamer. There's got to be accessibility, right? That's how you get new people into the hobby is a book like this that's attractive. Looks like you could probably get much more than $20 for it.
We wouldn't want to charge too much for it, but
yeah.
But it's one of those things where you can look at comps in the industry and be like, yeah, we could. We've made the decision that we're, especially at this point, we're not going to, but it punches above its weight for a $20 book. And one of the things that I love about being in, we're members of the Indie Game Developers Network, and we talk regularly with various members kind of about that strategy. And people say, oh, well, how did you make this so popular? Or how did you let's talk about your convention strategy and how you talk to people about your game. And ultimately, it really just comes down to engagement and accessibility. We're always willing to talk to people, any fan or supporter, or even if someone picks it up and just looks at the back of the book. We never want someone to come and have a question and leave with that question unanswered.
And the fact that you print domestically, I think, is great.
It's huge.
Yeah. Because you could print for far less overseas and make far more profit, but you choose to do it over here because you want to maintain that quality. And it says something about the integrity of your organization that you do that sort of thing.
Just on a practical method, shipping is, especially recently, shipping is expensive. I don't actually know where the printing facility is where we do it.
It is in Tennessee. It's not, we're in Kentucky, so we're right next door, basically. If we really, really had to, we could go rent a van and go pick up whatever we needed. We don't, but could. We have a great relationship with our printer. We love working with them, and we will continue to do so as long as they'll have us.
We got stuff to send them soon, I think.
We do. We just sent them stuff. We got more stuff. We got a reprint to send them.
So now that you've gotten everybody interested,
I hope so.
Right, what can we look forward to? Is there any other supplements? You got a pretty decent sized library of game supplements, enough to keep you going for a while. But is there anything in the future planned?
So let me give you the real quick of here's what we have, and I'll let Matt
Okay.
give you
Perfect.
what's coming. So what we have definitely with our first Kickstarter, we did Never Going Home, which is our core book, everything you need to play. The Book of Whispers, which is kind of our magic book. It's got some adventures, got some new magic paths, creating magic constructs like automatons, and then creating some other rituals. And it has a corruption pool mechanic for the narrator. We have our Tome of Corrupted Beasts, which is our bestiary. It's got 24 new monsters. Some of my favorite art in the entire line is in that book because Charlie is awesome. And then we have Once More Unto the Breach, which is a book of a whole bunch of different standalone missions written by people all over the industry. And then our second Kickstarter, because specifically, we said it was mission based. We had so many people say in 2019 when you all played it, we love that we could play individual missions, but we would love to play a campaign. So we got some of our writers and developers and designers together, and we came up with 3 new campaign dossiers, which take place in 1915, 16, and 17. It's Bones in the Dust, which is hunting eldritch artifacts during the Battle of Gallipoli. Blood on the Snow, which is the rise to the Russian Revolution with a demonic Rasputin, and then which has my favorite cover art in the entire line. And then we have Tears in the Sea, which is
That cover's so good.
It's naval combat in the North Sea on a Geiger-esque U-boat that ate its former crew. And that one was also the lead writer on that was Tristan Zimmerman, who's a former Navy man himself, who also just won a judge's spotlight Emmy this past year for his book Shanty Hunters. Those are fantastic. The entire line is great, and Charles Ferguson Avery has done the art throughout the entire line. It is consistent visually with what you would expect if you've already picked up the core book. Matt, tag in.
Go!
Right.
Boom.
So Brandon mentioned we've got I don't actually remember the process of narrowing it down, but we were like, well, we've got to do Rasputin, so that's 1916. Let's do Gallipoli, that's 1915. And then I don't remember how we ended up with the U-boat. I guess because it's the return to the U-boat wars that lead to America getting involved and stuff like that. So 1917, the U-boat stuff. Obviously, the war started in 1914 and ended in 1918. So the smart money would be on us filling out the line. And I think that is what we now intend to do, especially after this year. I don't know if I mentioned her by name, but like Sarah Orr Aten is our fiction writer for the series so far. And she worked our booth at Gen Con and got to talk to people about her work and the work in general of the game and stuff like that for the first time, because she's been at other booths before and obviously she's talked to us about it. But like she was super inspired coming back from Gen Con this year to write more, because she got to talk to people who were like, oh, I love World War One, and then she knows so much that I think she must have talked to somebody about all the battles of Ypres, because that's what she keeps mentioning, that like she wants to do stuff with Ypres. But inspired by her, like she and I had kind of independently come up with the same thing. So our 1914 book, even though that's well before the magic unleashing at the Battle of the Somme in 1916, obviously it can't have started all at once. And we already kind of explored that in the 1915 book, that like there's some precursor things that are being set up. So to take that back further into 1914 and basically postulate that the war itself was started in order to weaken the veil between the worlds so that this corruption of humanity could begin in earnest, and setting a lot of stuff within the Austria-Hungary, doing a lot of like cloak and dagger stuff, military intelligence, like where's the royal family going to be and who's getting access to them and how they're vetted, and like is that a good thing, is that a bad thing, like. And there's also, because there's so much tension within the Austro-Hungarian Empire with the ethnic minorities versus the royal family, and then the assumptions about who's going to come to what side in a future conflict and stuff like that. It's a very tense. I mean, it's literally, as history would prove, the powder keg that goes off and gets the troops moving in 1914. So to set a game, to put the players in that powder keg before it explodes, and let them play around with all of those different conflicting things with the Bosnian separatists and the military intelligence of the empire and the machinations of the royal family and stuff like that. So you now know, everyone who's listening to this podcast, as much as we currently know, because that's the discussion that we had, and that's what we're going to do. But we're still putting writers in place, and obviously nothing is down yet. But that's going to be the first one, 1914, and our 1918 book, I think, because we focused on Austria-Hungary in the 1914 British and especially the Anzac forces in the Gallipoli book, the Russians on the Eastern Front in 1916, and the German Navy in 1917. We haven't addressed the Americans. And so the 1918 book is going to be the Americans show up. And because I'm an American, I think I can talk some smack about my own country. Like, I think my goal for the America book is that the Americans show up and start kicking a bunch of butt, but it doesn't make the situation any better. Like, they make a mess. They come into a messy situation and they make the situation more messy, I think is how I want to approach the America book.
It's definitely stirring a pot.
Are you going to have anything related to the Spanish flu pandemic that happened around that time and have it have some correlation with? Oh, I see.
Brandon's got a big smile on his face. You want to talk about it, Brandon?
Doing a Muppet dance. Actually, it was funny. Funny you mentioned that, Scott. This is actually something that we have up for free on to anyone. It's up on DriveThruRPG. It's called "You Can't Fight What You Can't See." One of our writers, Vladimir Bradovich, approached us when everyone was pretty much locked down during the pandemic. He uses Never Going Home and has historically used Never Going Home as a tool for some veterans that he has worked with, just to kind of like, during that time, just get together, have some camaraderie, to talk about some issues that that they were going through, and in a time of deep isolation, he was using it as a tool to connect, which we thought was fantastic. And he came to us and said, "Hey, would you all mind if I wrote this mission as kind of my way of processing the pandemic?" And we said, "Can we lay it out and give it away for free at conventions?" And he says, "Absolutely, I don't care. Like, that's great." So it's available to anyone and everyone. And so, Scott, we definitely cover that, and it's widely available.
It's
awesome.
We funded the dossiers in 2020. No, we funded them in 2020, but the production was,
2019.
2019 is when we ran the funding. I don't know. It misses up, but definitely I was working on. I was supposed to be working on them throughout the beginning of 2020, and I did not. And so the production was delayed a lot, and all of our writers were in the same place. Like, the creative juices were not flowing in March, April, May of 2020 very strongly, and so we were delayed in delivering the Kickstarter. And so that adventure from Vlad it was a very small recompense for the delay in the production, but it was sort of an acknowledgement of these were unusual times in 2020, and it reminded a lot of people of 1918. So we did tackle that, at least in some way, with that one adventure. So,
Scott, yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. The answer is yes.
In case he got lost.
On the talk, so we're talkers.
Well, it's podcast, so that's a good thing.
I was like, you did this to yourself. Like, hey, you guys want to talk about this? Like, yeah, we do.
You're going exactly where we were hoping you were going to go. So where can we find Never Going Home? You glossed over it, but give us some details. Where's all the places we can find this?
Find Never Going Home for print on demand and in PDF, DriveThruRPG, along with all of the rest of the Wet Ink Games catalog. You can also find it. These are our offset print runs at IndiePressRevolution.com. And like I said, it's our offset print runs. If you like the matte feel of the cover, glossy pages like I do, that you can get them there, again, along with the majority of the Wet Ink Games catalog that has all of our stuff. You can also find it on at wetinkgames.com, but that's going to direct you to either one of those sources as well. So IPR will sell to friendly local game stores. So absolutely.
If you want to support us and a friendly local game store at the same time, you can have your friendly local game store get it from IPR, and they may already have it, or they may be able to get it. And I think there's a few other distributors a few other channels that you can get it, but those are the main ones. I would also say you can come to see us at a convention.
Absolutely.
We were just at Gen Con. We were at Origins. We'll be at PAX Unplugged come December.
Granite State Comic-Con.
Yeah, we're going to be at Granite State Comic-Con. So if anybody in the upper east wants to come to Manchester, New Hampshire, the middle of September, we'll be there. We'll have our books there, hanging out, playing some games, and selling some books.
One of the things I really love is hearing, we just got back from Gen Con, as Matt said, when retailers will come up to us and either one, ask us like, hey, can we make retailer purchases here and take stuff home? We're like, absolutely you can, but you got to come on Sunday because we want to sell to people who are here first. But also when they come and say, we can't keep this on the shelves, I'm like, great, I love it. Keep it up.
Order more.
Yeah, order more. I love hearing that.
I love hearing.
Yeah, it also helps too, because when we we have people who we see year after year at Origins, and because it's been our second year at Origins, this will be our second year at PAX Unplugged. We've been going to Gen Con in some form for a long time. We love when people come up and the first thing they say is hi, followed quickly by what's new, and they will just grab whatever is new. Whatever books they don't have from that we've released that previous year. And our goal for next year at Gen Con is to have 6 to 8 new products at Gen Con that we didn't have at Gen Con this year.
And that's Never Going Home with Matt and Brandon from Wet Ink Games. We'll see you next time in the dojo.
That's going to conclude this episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Please subscribe to the podcast for more great content. If you'd like to hear a particular topic, you can reach us on Facebook at the Dungeon Masters Dojo. Or you can drop us an email at thedungeonmastersdojo@gmail.com. Thank you, and have a good day.